The Legends of Land Show with Brandon Parker. Deconstruct the tactics of world-class land investors and learn tools to build a seven-figure land business. The Legends of Land Show is starting now.
This is Brandon Parker. Welcome to another episode of the Legends of Land Show, where it's my job to deconstruct world-class land investors, how they think about business and approach strategy as a land investor. My guest today is Dan Caradonna. Dan is a seasoned land investor with over 12 years of experience specializing in land flipping, funding deals, and buying land notes. He's navigated the land investing landscape, leveraged techniques and strategies, and built a diverse portfolio. In this conversation, we cover Dan's journey into land investing, his unique strategies for flipping, funding, and buying notes, and his insights into the current land market. Without further ado, please enjoy this wide-ranging conversation with Dan Caradonna. Dan Cardona, welcome to the show today. Dan, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit how you got started in land?
Sure. So back in 2012, I actually was looking to get in some type of real estate. And so I took a Jack Bosch course down here in South Florida and weekend course, and then ended up buying this whole course and then started flipping land and did that for about a year and a half with my brother, and then took a hiatus from it until 2018, and then got back into it, started flipping again. And then that same year, actually, I started funding deals where groups I was in and masterminds, they started needing money. So I knew the land business and it made sense to start doing that. So I got into funding there. I've been doing that ever since. And then April of 2023, I actually started getting into buying land notes. So that's what I've been doing as well for the last 15 months, and to keep my capital a little more passive. But I'm still doing the land flipping and land funding.
You were looking on the MLS. What are you always looking on the MLS? Is that part of your process, or did you do that randomly? What was that?
No, so it wasn't me looking on the MLS. It was actually him. And he's a coach actually for one of the land gurus out there. And even when he has like spare time, he'll be calling, looking at land deals online and Zillow or whatever, and basically just looking for deals that have been around a little while. And then I'll contact the realtors and make an offer. And then basically it's a follow-up thing, and it's time consuming. I mean, I think it took him like 6 months to get this deal, but that's how he ended up getting it.
Yeah, I've seen the Hive Mind guys doing MLS deals. Actually, he hit me up on Twitter the other day and said he's doing all of his deals are coming from the MLS. And I'm wondering if that's a function of the current real estate market where it's a little bit softer. And so the savvy land investors are poaching stuff offline that's been sitting for a while, or if that's just always been the case. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's definitely where they're poaching them, and it's also a good way if you want to save money on marketing. Where let's say you don't have $10,000 to throw in some letters, you can start making phone calls and finding on-market deals.
Yeah, that's actually a good angle because that's a common question people DM me in Twitter. What advice would you give to a noob? And a lot of times my go-to is find a market with good sell-through rates, scrub your data really well, send it to an area that has uniform pricing, and send a small blind offer. That's how you can get the best likelihood of getting a deal for the lowest output of cash. But that kind of beats that. Just calling MLS listings is it's
Yeah,
free. So
yeah,
that's actually even a better one. So
yeah.
I'll add that to my repertoire. What's the best thing about living in Pompano Beach? Have you ever ridden your bike down to the end of the Keys and seen the six-toed cats, Hemingway's six-toed cats?
No, I go biking probably every day, and I just started playing pickleball. But yeah, I mean, it's great living down here. Just the weather's always usually great, except for the hurricanes. But haven't been down to the Keys in a while. We're actually planning on going down there like within the next few months.
Okay, nice. Is pickleball as fun as everyone says?
It is. Yeah.
Is it?
It's
Looks so good.
yeah, I know. Yeah, it definitely is. My dad was trying to get me to play for a year, and I was like, oh, I got to learn the game. And then I finally just was up there visiting, and I jumped in and played, and now I'm addicted. So the biking has stopped and I picked up pickleball, except I bike
Okay.
to pickleball, but it's so addicting and fun.
I love ping pong and play a little bit of tennis, so I think
Yeah.
pickleball's like it's in the cards for me at some point for sure,
Yeah.
for sure. So when you think about your land business, you've got the flipping, buying notes, lending. What are you most focused on? How do you divide up your time between those, and how do you think about how you spend your time effectively?
Sure. Honestly, with the notes, most of that is handled by my partner and my wife. She's the one looking at all of the properties and deciding on which ones we want. And so I'm not really dealing with that much. I'm more focused on the land flipping and sending out the mail and kind of managing everything and all that and just dealing with some of the calls that I have to take. She doesn't have anything to do with that. The land funding, I handle probably 75% of that. But really, where she only steps in on that is to review the deals. If I'll vet the deal, and then if it looks good or we're interested in it, then I'll send it over to her, and then she'll review it, and then we'll make a mutual decision on if we want to move forward with it or not. Honestly, I'm not like grinding day by day. Most of our stuff is pretty passive. I have a lot of the notes. I don't send that much mail. And then because I did that years ago and just the funding took over and we're doing more just like funding deals now. And I used to try to market for those deals more often, meaning maybe getting in Facebook groups and just try to see people that need money or whatever. But to be honest with you, most of the stuff that's comes across my plate, they come across organically and they're from people that I meet at events or from masterminds or a friend of a friend or someone I've worked with before.
Mhm. Yeah, so it sounds like you're doing land. The flipping is a secondary part of your business. You've focused more on the lending at this point. Why'd you make that change? What's more interesting? And do you see better opportunity, or is it a lifestyle because it's different workload, or what is that?
Yeah. So it's a lifestyle. We travel a lot. We go on a lot of cruises. Ironically, I was talking to a friend yesterday, and a friend of ours, he does like around 250 deals a year. And I was talking with another friend this morning, and he was saying, "Why don't you like try to do that?" And I'm like, "Well, you know what? I'm just if I was 30, I'd be doing that now. But if you're doing 250 deals a year, it's going to be very hard to be hands free and hands off. And we travel a lot, so." To manage all that is just be very hard to do remote or not being around all the time. That's why my wife, she really likes just the funding deals because we were involved, but we're not kind of handling the day to day operations of it.
And so, how involved do you get? I know that some funders are underwriting deals and they're looking real closely at them. Are you like to work with a handful of people you trust and you just throw money towards their deals, or are you getting in the weeds and vetting deals really heavy? What's that look like?
We vet them, but most of the people that we're dealing with, that I've known them and I've done deals with them. If I haven't done deals with them, then we will definitely get in the weeds more and look at the property harder. But yeah, we don't get like super involved. Probably the biggest major thing is I definitely like them to have at least one realtor give an opinion on it and a realtor that is with that specializes in land. And most of these people I deal with, they have a track record that I know they've been in the land business for a long time, and I know that the deals they're picking are probably going to be pretty solid.
What are your favorite types of deals, or which are the ones that feel like they pencil more often than others?
One of the things I didn't mention earlier, actually, I was ironically just writing it down, was the transactional funding deals where they're a short term deal, 1 to 2 days. Sometimes they've gone 2 weeks. They've even gone as 30 days. Those are the ones we love where it's a double close, but for whatever reason, you can't do a double close. You need the funds and the investor doesn't have the funds. So they reach out to us and they say, "Hey, I need this money for a day. Can you do it?" And we're like, "Sure." They obviously pay less than the other JV funding deals that we do, but those are great ones because they're guaranteed money. Pretty much make it where we're guaranteed we're not going to be held with our money and our money's going to be sitting there. We check with the title companies to see like that the funds are going to be there on the B2C side before they sell it on the A to B side, and then we're safeguarded that way.
Could you
So
maybe run through like a spectrum of deals from maybe the cheapest money that people end up getting towards the most expensive money people end up getting? And it could be outside what you do as well, just to paint a picture of types of ways that people get money and how much it costs them.
sure, it's going to be a case by case basis because if you've never done a deal, then it might be a little more expensive than if you've been a land investor for 10 years, just because we don't have a tracker record with you, and we need a little proof that you know how to handle it. But a deal I did recently, I think we bought it for 13 and we ended up selling it for 40. And this was somebody I knew. So I think we had a straight kind of 50-50 deal where 50% profit to us and 50% profit to him. What we started recently was a waterfall effect where it's going to start off at 35% and then it's going to go up after 30 or 60 days, then it'll go to 40% and then it'll go to 45%, et cetera, et cetera. Some people I've dealt with before, they're just used to the 50-50, or even sometimes if it's big enough profit, they might say, "Hey, can we start it? Can we do 30-70?" And I
Mhm.
know they know what they're doing. I know they get it sold, and so we have a big long track record, and so I'm able to do that with them. I don't know if that answered your question, but
Yeah, that does. Do you put timelines on there? Is there a sliding scale for how long it takes for dispo?
sure. So we have a clause in there that if it goes over 1 year, that we're actually we would take 100% of the profit, but that really never happens. That's just they're the safeguard for that one deal that might come where if the investor fell off the face of the earth and just stopped doing land investing, we had to take over and we had to do everything and we had to try to sell it. And even at that point, we would probably still give them something. I've never had to utilize that. That's where that is. But I've had a couple deals go with some people that are pretty well known in the land business and they're going on for a couple of years. It's sometimes so we're used to it. It's the business, it's part of the business. And sometimes you're just going to get a bad egg, and there's really not much you can do, especially with we signed this was when I before we started doing the waterfall and all that, where it was just a straight 50-50 deal. So that the time has went on and I'm going to get the same amount of money that I would have got it if it would have sold a week later. But you learn from things like that. And so then that's why we do the waterfall effect.
Have you seen people get s it feels like the most logical way for people to get funding is through other savvy land investors like yourself. It's like you can get eyes on a deal and you know how to underwrite it pretty quickly. What other ways have you seen people get funding outside of through people like yourself?
Sure. Friends and family, that would probably be the number one way. And most of the time, they're not coming to me because they've already found somebody else. I just know this from people that I talk to, and they tell them like, "Hey, Brandon, we haven't done a deal lately. It's all my brother's funding him." So I know it from that way. The other way is hard money lenders are starting to step in and loan money on the land, like at 10 to 15%. And I know people that have those contacts, but I don't even know. I'm sure they're few and far between, and they don't want to give out their contact because when they need the money, they want to be able to go to them, and they don't want them to be tapped. So
Mhm.
that would be the major way. And I'm trying to think if there's any way else. I mean, you definitely can hit credit cards if you wanted to do that way, but ultimately, those are the two major ways that I've seen.
Yeah, and how do you look at selling your land flips? Like when you buy a piece of property and then you go to sell them, what's your go-to method to do that? Where do you list specifically? Do you do off-market MLS? Do you use realtors, Facebook, land.com?
So good question. That's definitely changed throughout the years. I used to have a lands account. Now all I do is pretty much the business plan is I find a realtor and have them deal with everything. Whereas before I was managing everything, putting it on my website, putting it on lands, putting it on those other sites and like land flip and whatever. And now I just hand the ball off and they take it and they do everything. And I make sure one state I'm dealing in right now, he really knows the state and does everything.
Do you find it beneficial to target a specific area and get to know it, or you like the idea of branching out nationwide and just finding hot markets?
Yeah, I think it's good to just stay in one area and just go around the whole state and just go round and round and just keep making the rounds. Send mail like every 3 or 4 months. If let's say you hit them all and then you run out, you're like, oh, I just mailed there. After 3 or 4 months, send it there again and get to know that area because I've learned from funding deals. I've run into problems in Delaware, and but if you get to know Delaware, you could probably make a killing up there if you really knew what you were doing.
Yeah, interesting. So What other things have you learned from, because you probably see a lot of deals from different styles of land investors come through. What are some big lessons that you think you, or big takeaways from land investors that are successful?
Sure, that's one of them. Staying in their areas, they're generally like not all over the place. They're very, very organized. And you can just tell. I know people that are in my masterminds, and I'm like, those guys, they got it going on. Like they know what they're doing. And it's just from A to Z. They're using VAs most likely to do everything that they shouldn't be doing. And they have good systems and processes. And they're just managing things. And that's the big thing that I see. The other kind of answer to your question is I've been seeing within the last few years is definitely more people bringing like subdivides to the table. And
Yeah, those
so
value adds are getting big. It seems that the land investing community has shifted a little bit, and there's such good information on the internet that a lot of people have come in and made good money sending 500 mailers to specific counties and doing these flips. And that to it's still blue ocean, but it seems like people need to pull themselves above the fray a little bit to be more successful now, and that's coming through. I think some of those value adds, some different ways of scaling VAs, like you were mentioning.
right.
Yeah, and you mentioned Delaware. Are there any states or counties that have interesting nuances that you think there's opportunity in, or where do you see opportunity just in general if you were someone to ask you about land?
I don't know. I think ever since COVID, there's so many more people mailing now. The state I'm mailing now, like I've mailed them years ago, and they weren't. Nobody really said anything about getting letters, and now they every time I talk to somebody, they're saying, "Oh, I get a lot of letters. Like, what's going on in this area?" So I think ever since COVID, really, areas not getting a lot of mail are kind of done and over with. But that being said, it's still definitely better than, in my opinion, than any other kind of real estate niche you're going to get into. But yeah, I think you just need to differentiate yourself and look at maybe if you see a property and they want retail value for it, maybe you can subdivide it and now you can make that deal work. Maybe you can do a JV with the seller and you don't have to come out of pocket. He doesn't have to do anything. And you can tell him like at the end of the day, like we're going to both walk away with 500,000. That would be a good way to strategize it. Or if you find a lot that where you can do mobile homes, figure something out with that. Just trying to think outside the box, and you still can do the straight land flips and buy something for 30 and sell it for 70, but you just have to sell. You just have to send more mail.
Yeah. Yeah. Earlier in the conversation, you mentioned Jack Bosch and his weekend course, I think you said. Was that in person? And can you talk about what that was like?
Sure.
So,
So it was a weekend event down here in South Florida. We're talking like probably over 12 years ago. So I don't remember much of it. I mean, it wasn't like there were a lot of people there. I'm sure like maybe only 5 people signed up. Maybe there were like 50 people in there. But it basically was just an introduction to his I think we paid $97 to be there. And then he tried to sell you on the course, which I ended up buying that day for $1,000, and that was pretty much it. It didn't give us any kind of access to him or coaching. After that, then the next step is coaching, but I've never done any of that with him. And then the good thing, one of the really good things about with signing up for that too is he still does them. Is these conferences he has. And I went to those in the very beginning, and he did a lot. He did a couple of those down in South Florida way back when. He hasn't been down here in years, but those were good things to do. And he's still doing those. Like he just did one in Las Vegas. He does a lot in Phoenix or Scottsdale because that's where he lives. Those are definitely good events to go to because you're going to meet a lot of the people in the industry. And you're also going to meet even people, if you're looking for money, that would be another place you might go to find people to help you out.
yeah, I just went to a fun event. That's why I was asking. I went to the Milk and Honey Supercars and Land event in Colorado. It was Drew
Yeah.
Haney. I think that
Yeah.
you might have said you knew where I was. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Exactly.
that was a blast. It was
Yeah.
fun. Adding race cars to anything, it makes it a little bit better, I think. So
For sure. Yeah, I think it was just the standard event, like 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, and we were nothing like that nowadays where they're like that, but it was just a straight 2-day event just showing what he does, and I'm like, "This looks interesting, this looks out of the box. I don't wanna be flipping homes," and that's why I did it.
yeah, were you flipping homes? Obviously, you were before, or were you just looking
No.
what to get into? Okay.
No, correct, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I flipped homes for a stint. I was a real estate agent right after I got out of college, and I started flipping homes. And I tell this story. One time I had a house jacked up in the air to fix the foundation. And I just had this realization that this is so much work for the amount of profit. I literally just lifted a house into the air. We need to find something different to do here.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, but so talking about coaches, what coaches do you what's who are some people you like out there you learn from or you interact with and that you might want to give some airtime to?
Sure. So I've been through a lot of the courses. I've been through Jack Bosch's Land Profit Generator. I've been through Seth's course. I've been through Land Academy, the Casual Fridays, Pete Reese's. I've done coaching with Casual Fridays. I've done coaching with Kevin Farrell with the Land Academy. There's probably a couple other courses in there that I'm forgetting, but all of them are good. I get great stuff out of all of them.
Yeah, it seems like there's this base amount of knowledge and then at some point they break off and they have a little bit different take. I think I've been through a few of those. Are there any of those systems or strategies that stick out to you more than others or things that concepts that stick out that are maybe a little bit unique that come from those?
A big thing for me was way back when I started Jack Bosch's training course. We were doing a lot of options where we put the property under contract and then we hold it. We try to sell it within 3 to 6 months. And I kept getting burned with that where I'd sell a property and then they would get the title and then the title was clouded. So
Mm,
then I found a land academy where they do the blind offers and basically those come back, the deal looks good. I talked to a realtor about it or we vet it, and then we ended up buying it. So that's one major thing I learned from the two of those. The Jack Bosch's was good because you're not putting the capital up, but you could get, burned in the end because the property might not be sellable. And then, but the other side of the coin is with Land Academy, where I would do the blind offers. I would be purchasing the properties, and then I wouldn't have to worry about that. But
mhm.
then if you make a bad buy, then you're stuck with the property.
Yeah, a little bit of risk analysis there. What do you think? I mean, what do you do today? What's your method that you go to now?
I do both, honestly. It just depends on the deal. I found one recently that it's on a lake, but there was a flood there. And so there's a big assessment that's going to be for like the next 30 or 40 years. And because of that, I ended up just doing an option on it. And if it wasn't for that, and I would have heard because we're buying it for 11, if it didn't have that assessment, I think it'd be worth like 75. But we started off at 50 and now we're dropping the price. We're around 40s. If it wasn't that case with the assessment, then I would have definitely bought it outright. So it's a case by case basis.
Yeah, that makes sense. If there's some sort of unknown that you're trying to hedge your risk for, then you go for that
Yeah.
option. How do you talk to oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I actually talked to a realtor. I was about to pull the trigger on that one, and I talked to a realtor. I got lucky, and I called the right realtor on that property, and she actually lives. I don't know if she lived on the lake, but she lives in that neighborhood. And I told her that number at 11, and in the beginning, I didn't tell her that number, and then she's like, "How much are you getting for?" I'm like 11. She's, "I don't know. It's so hard." So I'm like, "Okay, let me see if I can sell this without buying it."
Good move. How do you approach that conversation with the seller?
I just tell them that, hey, I have a list of buyers. I have a buyer's list of over 10,000 people. And so I'm going to send it out to them and see what happens and then go from there. You'll see it on the MLS. I kind of just, most of the time, they're just done with it. They don't want to deal with it. And so they don't care. And some of them will definitely say, no, well, I'm going to list it myself. So
Mhm.
just on that particular one, they were like, okay with it.
And do you go deep into explaining exactly what option is to them? I mean, because some people, I've talked to land investors, they say, yeah, I just show it to them. And a lot of them don't care, don't notice, and just say, yeah, go for it. Do you find that's the case, or
Yeah, I try to keep it as simple as possible because if you start muddying the waters, then it's just going to get too complicated for them, and then they're going to think you're maybe scamming them. I just try to keep it simple and tell them. I ask them outright, like, "Do you want to get rid of your property? Do you want to sell it?" Okay, and then just explain. All right, if you want to sell it, then I can probably get your property sold, and you're going to get what you want. So does it really matter?
that's not your go-to strategy. That's just when the property pops up that it makes sense for.
Correct. Exactly. I don't like doing that, but when it calls for it, I do it. The other way we do that, and I don't do this as much as other people, but where it's a thinner margin. They're like, okay, a lot of my friends do that, where if there's not a lot of meat on the bone, they'll do an option because they don't want to buy it and then make $5,000 off of it and wait for a year for it to close.
Those thinner margins almost start to feel more like a JV type deal, or you're just partnering up with them, like, I'll help you get this sold and take a percentage type of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I've learned some interesting stuff about some states along the way. Like Tennessee, I've heard that it's a great state, but you need to know it really well because there's a bunch of micro communities basically. If you break that state up into like maybe 8 pieces and each one's a little bit different, if you get to know each piece. So it's cool how there is almost some opportunity in getting to know a state that isn't Arizona, Texas, Florida, or just even getting to know those as well. I mean, there's a reason people are really successful there. But yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. And where are you heading on your next cruise?
We're actually going out, flying out to Rome and going to, it's 9 days, Malta, Barcelona, and I forget how you pronounce those other places, Nice, France, and there's a couple more, Slovakia or something like that. But yeah, so we're flying into Rome and we're actually land in Barcelona and then fly back from Barcelona in the beginning of September.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Did you get to the point where you could travel around and cruise and everything from the land business, or were you doing something else previously? What was your other part of your career look like?
Good question. So we actually were full-time Amazon sellers from like 2015 to 2022 and did very well with that. I saw the writing on the wall like 2018 or so that we weren't going to be wanting to sell on Amazon for the rest of our lives just because they're very hard to deal with as sellers. And so I got back in the land business and then the Amazon, it was definitely harder to travel more because just the kind of business we had and shipping and products and everything, it just was harder to get away. And I got back into the land and then we found notes and we found that's how we organically got into the funding too, because I think I said this earlier, if you're doing a lot of land flipping, it's harder to travel just because if you want to put out fires and you can't get on a phone on a cruise ship, you can't do that. So that's why we fell into the funding and then the notes fell into our lap too, learned about that. And we're like, oh, these two sound great.
When Starlink starts hitting cruise ships and you have full internet access, are you ever gonna stay back in Florida, or are you just hitting the ship forever?
I think our max is about 12 to 15 days on a ship. Once we're on there that long, it just is like time to get off. I do see these people where they're living on the ships. I met the guy that's been on Royal Caribbean ship the longest. He's been like cruising on them like 20 years straight. And I was standing next to him in the port. And yeah, and I met him. So you can Google him. And yeah, so we're not looking to do any of these long time cruises. We live down here in South Florida, so it's very easy to get out.
Yeah, it's nice. With managing notes, how are you managing them?
Are you meaning, are we using Madison or like one of those companies that are
Yeah, like
managing?
what software do you use? Like how do you keep track and how do you
Yeah, we're old school. We're basically doing everything through Google Docs. The person that is we're buying the notes from, they manage the notes. Like they're the ones that are keeping track of everything as far as contacting people that are default and things like that. And he's a local guy that I know personally. I think I can trust him with everything. And but yeah, we really don't have any software or any tools or anything because they're managing everything. So that it's really super free hands off. And what we really love about the notes is some of these sellers will offer where they'll do a buyback where if they default within a year or even a lifetime of the note, they'll buy it back. So we really love that. We trade it back in and then move on to another one.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so you're buying notes on the secondary market. I was under the impression you were selling land and getting notes, like
No, I should
generating
have
new
been
notes.
clear on that, but yeah, I have done some of those notes in the past, but right now we're pretty much just buying seasoned ones. Yeah.
Can you just talk a little bit about that? Maybe give an overview of what that looks like and your risk analysis, the returns.
Sure. So the returns generally we're getting like 15 to 18% returns, and they're usually probably about 7 or 8 years left on the note. As far as risk analysis, I'm not really sure exactly what you mean by that, but like most of these, they've been paying for at least a year. I don't know if you had any other particular questions on that.
If you hold $250,000 worth of notes at 18% paying off over 8 years, and economy crashes and all 18 of them stop paying,
Right.
like
Yeah.
what happens?
Sure, that's definitely been discussed before. If that does happen, then we definitely will have to deal with it. We have a lot of our money in that. But what happens is I would take them back and I would sell them myself. I have friends that I tell about the notes and whatnot, but then I tell them, once I tell them the returns, and I tell them, oh, if they defaulted, then you would have to sell it. Then usually after that, they're not interested. But I've been in this business 12 years, so if they defaulted and I got them back, it won't be that big of a deal. I would have to just try to sell them and then get my money back, and so we just wouldn't have that nice monthly payment coming in.
And by taking them back, you mean the physical property? You foreclose on the property?
Correct, exactly. Yes,
Mhm.
we would
So
take
then
them
you
back. Yeah.
so do you when you buy a note, do you take into account what the property is, or do you buy a bundle of notes that's packaged? What's that look like?
No, they're all singles. Really, they're just nothing really too crazy or special about them. I mean, it's just people that want to buy land, will be it Florida, Colorado, California. They just want the dream of owning land, and they may have a piece of land that they're never going to see in their lifetime, but they want it and they're paying it off, and that's where we step in to be the bank.
Yeah, makes sense. And why do note sellers sell notes? Is that purely a cash flow play so they can get into their next they gotta do $1 million purchase, they sell off some of their notes to make that happen? What is that?
Exactly. Yeah, generally that's the case. In fact, the main guy that I buy them from, I've asked him that, and you never know if you're getting like the right answer because does he know something I don't know?
Yeah.
But I guess it's just to deploy more capital, and one of the one of the reasons I do know is because if you try to go do the bank, it's going to be very hard for them to like give finance that money or do anything with it. So it's just cheaper and a better business decision to offer 18% on your notes because if we tried to do it with the bank, it's going to be probably more money and more difficult.
Well, that makes sense. They're almost taking a loan out at cheaper money and easier money. That makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Do some of them say they're getting 20%, 25% on the notes and they sell them at 18% and take a hedge, like a difference there? Is that a tactic?
Yeah. So the note brokers will do that, but that's not what these guys are doing, or that's not what I'm doing. So yeah, there are people there that do that. That's just not my world.
Okay. Interesting. I'm always interested in the little nuances of how the money moves around the stuff. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
cool. Learned a little bit there. Thank you.
Sure.
Um, and I'm just curious about the Amazon business. Were you drop shipping or did you manufacture a product or what?
So we've done like everything. So most of it was fulfillment by Amazon. We buy products and we ship them into Amazon, and then the Amazon holds them in their warehouses, and then they ship them out. So we're never dealing with anybody ever shipping it to an individual house. Basically, it's shipped to Amazon, and then while you're sleeping in the middle of the night, it gets shipped out. And we were doing like a couple $1 million in sales a year. Definitely could have even scaled it more if my partner would have wanted to, but we were happy where we were. And that involved a lot of shopping too. So we would shop around the country, and it's called retail arbitrage. So we go to a lot of the Nike outlets and Marshalls and Bed Bath and Beyonds and TJ Maxx's and buy out Nike, and not buy out Nike, but they actually cap you off at $5,000 a person. You buy them, you ship them into Amazon, and then they ship them out for you.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that was a
Yeah.
lot of fun.
That's a hard business. I had an Amazon fulfillment by Amazon business. I invented a VR mat and had it manufactured in China. did the customs and stuff to get it over, got it to Amazon, and the hardest business I've ever run in my entire life. Since you
We
were
did try
successful doing that's impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, we did try private label, and that didn't really work out. I know we could have made it work, but it's a whole different ballgame.
Mhm.
It's like doing subdivides versus doing owner financing, two different worlds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How'd you manage your inventory during like the Christmas season when you and your cash flow to bring in whatever 10
Sure.
times the product?
Yeah, it was just we would hit lines of credit if we needed to, and also max out 0% credit cards and things like that. Honestly, though, like you run out of time at the end of the day, and we call them runners, but like people that shop for us, and there were only like two or three, but I have friends that they had 10, 15 shoppers. And so when you have 10, 15 shoppers, that's when you really need to start worrying about running out of money. But with two or three, it wasn't that bad because there was only so many places you could go because it was time consuming because you're driving around and you're looking for deals. But it was definitely busy during that season.
How'd you survive the COVID shutdown with the shipping and the transportation and stuff?
That's when we pretty much got out of it.
Me
Yeah.
too.
So yeah, and I had a store too, like a physical store, so I could get wholesale accounts with some of these shoe companies. And at the same time, our shoe store the lease was up, so it just worked out where everything was just what we're having these issues with Amazon. The lease is coming up on the store. We can't shop because we could shop, but yeah, just like things like that. It was all the major things that kind of okay, we need to go full time in the land now.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, our factory in China shut down and it just stopped, and then the ships were backed up, and it was like, okay,
Wow.
this
Yeah,
makes it tougher to run a business where we're selling stuff. That was my natural exit point too.
for sure.
But interesting. So as we get towards the end here, I generally asked a couple questions. Before the last question, what are your kind of final thoughts or anything we missed on the land business, buying notes, lending on land deals, and talk. Let's hit one more topic as we wind down here. Let's talk about lending, the capital on land deals, like exactly what you offer, what maybe you'd want people that are listening to this to hear about that.
Sure. So if you have a deal that you need funded, I can just send you all the criteria. You can email me at dan@ifundland.com. But like I said, there's a waterfall effect. It starts off at 35% and it just goes up from there. If you want to do transactional funding, standard rates for that is like 3% for a couple days. And then generally, when you do send me some information, I can send you what the criteria is. We'd sign contract on the property and just other things. Like, for instance, if it has a 40% terrain, unless it's like a super anomaly, we're probably going to skip out on that. So there's other things on our criteria sheet that would let you know if we'd be interested in it or not. And my email is dan@ifundland.com. You can also go to our website too, ifundland.com.
Nice. And I'm curious about the 40% terrain. Is that 40% unusable terrain? And then why'd you pick that number? Is that just like a
What's actually like 25 or 30%, like 40, it's like a definite no. But you never say never. Like I just funded a deal in Idaho. It's like we paid 225,000 for it, and at the very end, like the terrain is like way more than 40. It's on the water and it like breaks off like a cliff. So,
Mhm.
and that was actually somebody just looked at it and they're like, yeah, I like it, but the drop off at the end just doesn't work for me. Anytime you get over 25 or 30%, though, you're at the point where people are not going to spend the money to build. And that's where we're at as far as the terrain.
If let's say there's a 2-acre property and half of it has 40% terrain, it's basically unusable. How do you comp that? Do you just look at it like, okay, this is 1 acre of property basically and comp it that way?
Correct, exactly. And then we definitely would do our due diligence to make sure that the property is buildable and that we're going to be able to do whatever we wanted to do with that. But we will comp it as 1 acre of land instead of 2, and definitely talk to some realtors in the area and just make sure we're not missing anything.
Any other interesting, I'm sure there's all kinds of criteria, but any other kind of interesting criteria like the terrain that sticks out that you look for?
No, but like one that came across was like HOAs. If it has an HOA, it just depends. If the HOA is, $25 a year, then that's not going to be a problem. If we think the deal is going to sell in 40 days, then that shouldn't be a problem. Anything else as far as criteria? I think it just depends. There's some states like New York, if you've got any type of wetlands, then you're going to probably be dealing with an issue where, like in Florida, you have wetlands, you might just be fine.
The last question I generally ask people is, a lot of us are on Twitter. If you could put one message onto Twitter that everyone in the world would see, what would you write?
So Twitter is how many characters? I'm not a big Twitter guy. I mean,
140. So it's like a short paragraph,
okay. So this is in like regards to land, or is this in?
This is in regards to anything you'd want to say. And actually, since you're in Florida, and I know there's like decent billboards in Florida, if you could put a billboard up in Florida and everyone in Florida would see it, what would you say?
Okay. And so what was the question again? What you said?
Just any message to the world. You can
Gotcha.
throw a message out to the world. You can just throw one message out to the world.
Oh, brother, you're throwing me on the spot here. Yeah. Trying to think here if I want to make it like business or if I want to make it like.
You should do one of both. You can have one going north on the Federal Highway 1 in Florida, and
Right.
one going south. One business and one life goals.
Gotcha. Basically, one thing I would just say is don't stress out over things. The reason that kind of jumped in my head was I was playing pickleball yesterday, and this lady, we were talking about losing weight, and she's, oh, it's been proven that if you stress out, you actually, like, in the brain, it puts on more calories on you, which makes sense. Like a lot of times when you're stressing, you want to eat more and things like that. So that would be one thing there. And then as far as I think business, I would say what pops in my mind is stay away from MWA, which MWA is stay away from minimum wage activities. You shouldn't be writing, like I have a lady that can write copyright for me for $25. Like I shouldn't be spending 2 or 3 hours writing copyright for something. And now even better, you can use ChatGPT and that might get it done for free. So you shouldn't be doing things like that. And then also, if you're really trying to start a business or whatever, and you're trying to grind or whatever, trying to hustle, you shouldn't be doing things like maybe mowing your lawn, pay somebody to do that. If it costs them $50, take the 2 hours and work on your business instead.
It's wonderful advice. I like it. Where can people find you online? You've got the iFund Land, is that right? And
Correct.
Is that the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, it's ifundland.com, also easytransactionalfunding.com, and then also elite360res.com. They all lead to the same link. So ifundland.com is the easiest one. You can also find me on Facebook and just my name, Dan Caradonna. And then I'm on Twitter, but I don't really do too much on there. Best thing to do is just hit me up on Facebook or email me.
Wonderful. Thank you for coming on the show today, Dan. Learned a lot about the lending and capital and notes business, and it was great to meet you. So yeah, good to have you on today, Dan.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
Have a nice day. Thanks.
The Legends of Land Show.